My number 10 best chess game of the 1930s is a brilliancy by two little-known players, Frank Parr and George Wheatcroft. This game was played in the 1938 City of London Correspondence Championship. Now, Wheatcroft had already been British Correspondence Champion once, and Frank Parr would later be a four-time British Correspondence Champion. This game is a credit to both players, but it is ultimately Parr who will land the most incredible blows in the game. This game begins with a Grunfeld defense, and a testament to both players. Although the Grunfeld is cutting-edge theory for the time, they are actually going to follow established modern theory for about the first 10 moves. We get d4, knight f6, c4, g6, g3, a fianchetto variation against the Grunfeld here, bishop g7, bishop g2, d5, the critical Grunfeld move striking out in the middle of the board, pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, knight c3, and you get the typical exchange here and the pawn break, pawn to c5, the critical mechanism to establish counterplay against the Grunfeld. Now, e3 supporting the center, castles, knight e2. Of course, this is more natural than knight to f3, allowing a pin here that can be quite annoying because you want flexibility for the knight. Knight c6 and castles, and at this point I think Wheatcroft starts to go off the rails. Everything is supernatural so far, but now he trades here on d4. Modern theory keeps the tension and plays queen to a5, although white does have interesting ideas to play for an advantage here as well. So after pawn takes d4, alleviating some of the pressure here on the center, he strikes out with e5. Now, I'm not even sure that this move is so bad. The computer says you can get away with it, but I think e5 in this kind of position is not very Grunfeld-esque because you're allowing the d-pawn, Delroy the d-pawn, to advance up the board, and as a player on the black side of the Grunfeld, that is kind of your greatest nightmare. You have to keep this d-pawn under lock and key. If you let it get up the board, it can really just kind of roll over your position. So here, e5 does allow d5, and at this point, I think a really critical move was knight to a5. Now, yes, knights on the rim are grim. I understand why you might not want to put the knight over here, but this is very typical in the Grunfeld. The knight often has access to c4, which can be quite good, and it supports some interesting counterplay on the queen side. Instead, the knight goes to e7 in the game, and on e7, the knight doesn't really have a good role to play, and it's really kind of awkwardly placed. At this point, white has a really large advantage, and white is not letting go of it for the rest of the game. So, bishop to a3, developing the bishop with beautiful pressure here, and of course, the bishop might support the pawn's advance at a proper moment. Rook over to e8, knight to c3, queen to a5, hitting both the knight and the bishop, and white defends with the queen as well, covering both pieces at the same time. Now, pawn to e4 from Wheatcroft, and this move is a big mistake. This is a good moment to pause your video and ask yourself what you would play here with the white pieces. Well, the move you should really go for, and if this move is not natural to you, really take a moment and process this position because this idea is very common in the Grunfeld and really in a lot of positions with fianchettoed bishops. Knight takes e4, sacrificing an exchange down here on a1, but to get that exchange, black has to give up that very, very critical dark squared bishop. In this case, that is totally not possible. And after bishop takes a1 here and rook takes a1, black is basically busted. Now, normally you would have ideas like bishop to b2 and then knight to f6 check, or trying to work the queen over to d4 and mate on g7, and that would be plenty. You would be happy to sacrifice your exchange here for such kind of play. But in this case, you also have ideas like knight f6 check, which is going to win an exchange, and black really doesn't have any way to hold the position together. I wonder if Wheatcroft kind of thought he might be able to get away with knight takes d5 here, and maybe he went for this position thinking he could go for this, but you actually can't. Now, simple moves like rook d1 are also great. Again, anything where you get an unopposed dark squared bishop in the Grunfeld is probably going to work out. But here you also have a tactic. Queen takes d5, and after queen takes d5, a monster fork on f6, hitting the king and rook, and most importantly, the queen. White is going up material and easily winning the game. In fact, though, the position after rook takes a1 is so strong for white that the computer actually can't find anything better than knight takes d5 walking into this. That's how good white's position is. So after knight takes e4, we actually see knight takes d5. I can't really imagine that Wheatcroft was trying to get this position, but maybe he was. He does eliminate the d pawn, but white's pieces are just dominating this position. So rook ac1 intending rook to c5, bishop to e6 trying to support that knight, rook c5 anyway, very natural, queen b6, please trade queens with me. Of course, no way we're trading queens, rook to b5 right here. And now the queen goes over to a6 and knight to c5, hitting the queen, hitting the bishop right here. And it looks like you're just winning on the spot, like totally crushing. If queen to d6, there's knight takes, and you're hitting the queen over here. And after queen takes, white has 3 pieces on the knight. So white is winning the knight up a piece, easily winning the game. And if you try going to c6 instead, queen c6 in this position, then still knight takes e6. And here to recapture and support the knight, you want to play f takes e6, but now rook takes d5 and you win a piece again because of pawn takes, bishop takes d5 check. This is really a great game for showing all kinds of great tactical and checkmating patterns. And, you know, here's just another fine example of a fork and a very typical tactic by white. So after knight c5, it looks like the game is over, but here we should give credit to Wheatcroft. Even though this game is going to go really, really badly for him and has been going really badly, he still plays very resourcefully. There's only one move that keeps the game complicated and gives him some real chances. It is the move knight takes e3. With his own queen hanging, he counterattacks and hits the white queen down here. White can't recapture with the queen because then the rook on b5 is hanging. And after f takes e3 in this position, then you can capture the white queen. Yes, you can also capture the black queen, but the game is very complicated. And, you know, white is not just winning the game as he is trying to do. So in the game, after knight takes e3, we actually see knight takes e6 here and knight takes f1. You might be tempted to capture here and just say, all right, I capture, next turn I'll capture here, and, you know, I'm just going to win the game there. The bishops will be too strong, but actually black wins here with knight d2, and suddenly everything is hanging for white. The queen is under attack. There's this threat here, which would win a bishop after the bishop blocks. You also have the knight under attack, and the queen is hitting both of these. So even though white's pieces look very strong and active in the position, things can easily turn in this open position if white is not careful. So after knight takes f1, we see knight g5, the correct move, going after f7. Now, also this knight is down here, so f7 cannot be saved, so the knight is saved instead. Knight to d2, and you're hitting the queen, and you're also threatening rook e1 check. So queen takes f7 check, and king h8. Now, in this position, if you are a computer, then you can win the game a little more quickly, a little more efficiently than Parr does in the game. You can do so with bishop to b2, which threatens mate down here on g7. And of course, if bishop takes b2, then there's mate on h7. But to do that, you have to be willing to allow rook to e1 check, when you must block, and then you lose your bishop with check. And after king g2, there's also queen c6 check here, which you can meet with either f3 or king h3, and you are winning the game. Ultimately, the critical point is that if ever rook g8, which is really the only way to try to hold the mate here once the checks run out, you have bishop takes, rook takes, queen f8, rook back, and then knight f7 mate. All of this is very, very nice, but again, you have to drop a bishop with check, and you have to also be sure you're getting out of the checks after queen c6 check, and it's a little bit challenging. If you're a computer, you can do it, but this is 1938. There are no chess engines. Today in correspondence chess, we have chess engines, but these players are playing on their own. So Parr finds another move that is also excellent, also winning, and is a little more human. Bishop to d5. So now his king can run up here after rook e1 check, and also he has a very big threat. If queen takes b5, the threat is revealed. Queen g8 check, always beautiful. Rook takes, and knight f7 checkmate. The classic smothered checkmate, reset the counter. So this threat is so massive in this position, there's almost no way to stop it. The only thing you can do is play pawn to h6 so that your king has this escape square, and there is no checkmate with queen to g8. So after h6, now we play bishop b2, kind of the same idea we had a moment ago, although now our king can run here. We don't have to give up our bishop with check. Again, we're threatening mate here on g7. If the bishop captures, there's mate here once the 7th rank clears. So bishop b2, now rook over to g8, trying to defend. Of course, this is very passive, but what else are you going to do? And at this point, there's still a lot of stuff hanging here for white, so it's not so obvious how you can deliver the win. White finds what at least is the most human winning move, queen to d7. There is also another move, pawn to h4, which is a computery winning move that is also quite nice, and I'm not even going to break that down because the lines are very complicated. But in the game, we get queen to d7, which does defend the rook right here, but we have a good resource to try, and Wheatcroft does go for it. Queen to a4. There's pressure here along this diagonal, and there's also the idea of queen to d1 check, and it's actually going to be checkmate on f1. So black has some counterplay here. It looks like black is just getting rolled over, but black has counterplay, and where is the win? Well, this is a great moment to pause your video and try to find that win. There is one very pretty winning line. Well, the winning line starts with bishop to b3, cutting off the attack on d1 and also obviously hitting the queen over here. Now, the only natural move to try for black is knight takes b3. What was the point here? Because if you just recapture, you're losing your momentum and the game is still very, very complicated. Well, the critical point here is knight f7 check, king h7, and again, if you didn't see this point the first time, when it's very difficult to spot this coming when you're needing to find bishop b3 first, I would encourage you to pause your video and try to find the correct move here. Well, Parr's next move is included in many combination books for great reasons. Of course, this is the kind of move that deserves to be immortalized. Rook h5. The point of bishop to b3 was to clear the 5th rank. With the 5th rank open, we are now able to play this move, sacrificing both our queen and the rook, and this move is forcing checkmate. If queen takes d7, there is knight to g5 check. Because of the pin here, the king must step back, and then rook takes h6 is an immediate checkmate because of the pin on the long diagonal. Rumor has it that this final mating position was put on a tapestry that Parr hung in his home. And I can't blame him. If I achieved checkmate in this way in a beautiful game, this position would be on all my social media accounts. It'd probably be my profile pic, so I completely understand tapestrizing this final position. It is an incredible one. Also, after rook h5, if the rook is captured, now capturing down here is nice, but it's not even immediately decisive. The game will continue and black can resist there. So much better is the checkmate in 1, queen to f5 checkmate. Also a beautiful checkmate. I'm not sure that you put this one on a tapestry, but still very, very beautiful. So now rook h5, and you don't have to capture either the queen or the rook. So in the game, Wheatcroft actually tries queen to a5, which does hang the queen, but taking the queen is definitely not the strongest move because instead you have rook takes h6 as Parr does play. Now, you can't capture with the king because the knight is defending the rook, so the only way to capture is with the bishop. Bishop takes, and then knight g5 is immediate checkmate because the king can't even go back to h8 because of the bishop on the long diagonal, and it is double check. And famously, when you have double check, the only way to get out of double check is to move the king. You can't block 2 checks or capture 2 pieces in 1 turn, and here there is no move, so a beautiful, beautiful checkmate. I think this game is really something special. Every time I've seen, someone taking this game for the first time, they've really had a delighted reaction, and I hope you have as well. I think this is one for the ages. So if you're interested in seeing more of my favorite games of the 1930s, then simply click on the playlist that is popping up on your screen as I speak.